From sightings in the dark expanse of the sea to encounters with government agencies and unsuspecting divers, these real mermaid sightings will leave you convinced. Up first is the Dark Passage. Mermaids are typically imagined as creatures of the shore, but for much of history, sailors out in the open ocean were the ones who encountered them the most frequently. One commercial sailor, unfortunately, had such an encounter in the pitch-black Atlantic. The haunting melody of a siren song echoes across the ship, sending chills through the air. Though mesmerized, the sailor's survival instincts do take over and he manages to resist the call. But soon he realizes that the sirens weren't just singing, they were stalking him. They had kept pace with the ship's wake, staying hidden but closing in. It's hypothesized that this is how sirens have hunted for centuries, though usually they prefer the aftermath of a shipwreck. Swimming alongside a vessel, their intoxicating songs often lure sailors who have had a bit too much to drink, which allows them to then pull them close to the water's edge. Once near enough, the sailor might stumble in or be available to be dragged under by an enterprising mermaid. It's believed that one human could feed an entire pod of sirens, which is why they hunt in packs. With one siren singing on each side, others swim below the ship, ready to strike when their prey is close enough to fall into their grasp. Thankfully, this sailor manages to resist and survive. Next is rocky gossip. In the time people have been researching mermaids, one strange constant behavior is their enjoyment of sitting on rocks by the water and basking in the sun. No one really knows why they do so. Some have said it helps them warm up, others say it's to keep an eye on their surroundings. But from this video, cryptozoologist Mark Kerbaum hypothesized that instead, this time on the rocks might be something else. Certainly there seems to be a difference between one mermaid sunning itself and a whole group communicating and chattering on the rocks. Mark Kerbaum says this might be a chance for certain groups of mermaids to socialize, perhaps even spread gossip. This could be a deep-seated part of the otherwise unknown social lives of mermaids. No doubt they are intelligent and social creatures. We have enough evidence of their pods and reef nests, but seeing them socializing and gossiping on the rocks is something completely different. Along with all their mystical elegance though, these mermaids do not flee with much grace. A reminder that on land, they're little more than scaly seals. Next is a small town sighting. A small town was rocked when the government showed up and pulled a haunting creature out of the still waters of their local quarry. For some time there had been the myth and rumor of the woman in the water, a sort of mystical creature that in some stories was a healer and helper and in others a hunter. But no one really wanted to go diving in the old quarry to see if they were true. That is until 2023 when the stories began to pick up and strange men in black suits began to frequent the quarry. The story finally exploded when the quarry was declared off limits due to a supposed gas leak from the depths. Various three-letter agencies showed up and cordoned off the space. Now, thankfully for us, a group of intrepid and curious teens decided to break the rules and sneak into the hill overlooking the quarry, from where they got a full view of hazmat-suited workers dragging something out of the water, which had taken on a strange green hue since the quarry was closed off. This footage was then taken, seeming to show a mermaid being dragged out of the water and onto a stretcher. The officers had evidently poisoned the water with something and were allegedly going on to autopsy the recovered mermaid. The real question is, how did a mermaid wind up inside a landlocked quarry, and why was it there for so long? Next is the Coast Guard catch. This footage was secretly released by a leak inside the Coast Guard and appears to show a mermaid almost accosting a group of Coast Guards on an urgent rescue mission. A large tropical storm had hit and a ship had capsized in rough waters, its crew desperately calling for aid. The Coast Guard rushed out to save them, only to be intercepted by a mermaid. It's thought by some cryptozoologists that the mermaid is but one part of a broader pack, perhaps meant to distract and deceive the oncoming rescuers to allow the rest of the pack to hunt down the straggling sailors, an adaptation to their long-standing pastime of plucking sailors from smashed ships. Thankfully, the whole thing happened so fast that the highly professional Coast Guard hardly even have time to react, and instead of chasing after a supposedly mythical beast, these well-trained rescue workers put it from their minds as some sort of fantasy and push on to the desperate and lost crew of the capsized ship. Thanks to their quick response and direct action, not a single sailor was lost that day. Next is an Aussie Mermaid. A diver was shocked to have a close run-in with a mermaid in the Great Barrier Reef. The Barrier Reef is one of the great reef ecosystems on Earth and holds a huge amount of biodiversity. As a massive coral reef, it's grown on top of old coral, leading to strange, large formations with all sorts of tunnels and hidden alcoves, making this a fantastic habitat for sharks and fish, and apparently even more. This diver was a local and had gone diving at this site like many times before and expected this dive to be like all the others, an easy, shallow dive where the meditative and serene environment could bring them peace and calm. Instead of peace and calm though, the diver got the shock of their life when, as they were investigating a coral outcropping, saw a mermaid coming straight for them. The mermaid clearly doesn't identify him as it approaches, not seeing the diver beneath the coral, and swims directly overhead, giving a once-in-a-lifetime view of a mermaid in its natural habitat. This is truly incredible footage, but has been decried by many as a cheap hoax, despite the diver's insistence on its truth. Next is the murky mermaid. All the childhood fears I had of freshwater sharks and monsters lurking in the depths of a lake came rushing back as I watched this man swim in a murky, isolated body of water. But then things took an even more unsettling turn. It wasn't just the shadowy water that seemed to hold secrets, it was the eerie presence of a mermaid lurking just beyond the edge of his vision. She darts in and out of view, barely perceptible but unmistakably there. We usually think of mermaids as creatures of the sea, confined to salt water, but this footage suggests otherwise. While it's true that oceanic mermaids must stay in salt water lest they suffer consequences, there appears to be a freshwater species as well if this video is anything to go by. It's not entirely surprising considering that many rivers and lakes host rich and varied ecosystems. However, these freshwater mermaids likely live in small, dispersed populations and migrate frequently, since lakes and rivers simply don't offer the same abundance of prey as the vast oceans and coral reefs. The idea that these creatures could survive in such environments challenges what we thought we knew about mermaid lore and makes you wonder what other surprises might be hiding in our own backyards. Finally, Noah's sighting. A deep-sea observation drone almost gets caught up in a mermaid hunt. This footage was taken over half a kilometer below the surface from an ROV that was doing a standard checkup on an oil well when a school of fish flashes in front. Then something happens that must have stunned the operators. One of the fish is struck with a harpoon. Humans can recreationally freedive about 25 meters to hunt fish, but nothing we know of could go spear hunting and survive over 500 meters of depth. Then the creature responsible briefly flashes in front of the camera collecting its catch, and we get to see a few key details. A vaguely humanoid head, what could be arms or shoulders, and a distinctively fish-like tail. Though this may not be definitive proof, and many skeptics have many issues with this footage, many others have taken this as the most convincing piece of mermaid evidence ever released. Those were real mermaids caught on tape that will leave you convinced. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.